She was always in my shadow until one night everything changed. Discover the shocking truth behind my family's favoritism, and how I finally stood up for myself. This is a story of redemption and self-discovery. I've always felt like the one who had to work the hardest to get anything in life. Rachel, that's me. The one who feels overlooked, underappreciated, and constantly chasing approval. And then there's Sophie, my twin sister. She's always had it easy. From the very beginning we've been different, and no one in the family could ever see that. Sophie and I had just graduated from medical school, an accomplishment that felt bittersweet. We both graduated with honors. Our GPAs were identical, and we both made it through the grueling years with resilience. But the moment I stood on that stage in my cap and gown, I felt the difference in how our achievements were treated. Sophie was the golden child in our family, and I was just the other twin. Even growing up, it was clear that Sophie always got more. While I spent my afternoons in the library, buried in textbooks, Sophie was out at soccer practice or shopping with Mom. Our parents didn't attend my science fairs or presentations, but they'd be front and center at every one of Sophie's volleyball games. I never minded much, not at first. After all, she's my sister. I loved her and I was proud of her. But as time went on, I couldn't ignore the way things were. How everything always seemed to revolve around her. When it came time for medical school, we both applied to the same programs. We were accepted to the same school in Michigan, and yet somehow the excitement and pride from Mom and Dad always felt more intense when it came to Sophie. Even when I scored in the 98th percentile on my MCAT on the first try, their response was lukewarm. "That's nice, dear." Meanwhile, Sophie had to retake hers, and our parents paid for an expensive prep course to help her out. The most glaring example of this favoritism happened when we both graduated. Sophie was debt-free. Mom and Dad paid off all of her student loans. But not mine. No, I was expected to take care of myself. Sophie's education was paid for, while mine was left for me to figure out. And every time I asked them about it, they would tell me, "Rachel, you've always been more resourceful than Sophie." Resourceful. That was their excuse for everything. "She needs more help than you do." Stung. It stung deeply. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was nod and accept it. It wasn't that I didn't love Sophie. I did. She's my twin sister after all. But I couldn't deny that the weight of the difference in how we were treated was crushing me. I worked just as hard as she did, if not harder. But somehow that never seemed to matter. Then one day, just as I was starting to come to terms with my frustration, something unexpected happened. After I received the news about my fellowship at Johns Hopkins, an opportunity that would pay off my student loans, finally lift the burden, I was going through some old family things when I found something strange. A letter. It wasn't addressed to me, but when I opened it, I saw it was from my mother. It was dated when I was little. I hadn't seen it before. I had no idea why it was hidden away in one of our old boxes of keepsakes. The letter was a promise from my mother, written in her neat cursive. "I will always support you, no matter what you choose to do, no matter where you go." I stopped reading, my heart pounding in my chest. What was this? Why hadn't she ever said this to me directly? Why had she hidden it away like this? I felt my hands shake as I reread the words. "I will always support you." It hit me like a ton of bricks. My mother had always promised me support, but somehow I'd never felt it. All those years of working harder, proving myself, never once asking for anything in return, and she had always said she would support me. But she didn't. She supported Sophie. Sophie got the help, the attention, the praise. And now when I found out that my mom had written this letter, it only made me feel more alone. I sat down on the floor, holding the letter tightly. A sense of confusion washed over me. How could she have written this and never acted on it? How could she love me enough to write such a thing, yet fail to show me that same love? I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. All I wanted was for my family to see me, to see my accomplishments, to see that I had worked just as hard as Sophie, if not harder, to feel like I mattered. But the more I thought about it, the more lost I became. Was I just too sensitive? Was I reading too much into it? Or was there something deeper at play? The letter left me with more questions than answers. And even though it was just a letter, the weight of it felt like a secret that had been buried for years. I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront it, or even if I wanted to. But deep down I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. I had to figure this out, even if it meant uncovering truths I wasn't ready to hear. For deeper revelations and emotional exploration in the story, the letter from Mom weighed heavily in my hands as I sat there, staring at the words over and over again. The promise. The love that never came through in the way I needed it. The hurt, too, that had been buried under years of trying to prove I was worthy, trying to prove that I deserved the same treatment as Sophie. But no matter how much I tried, it felt like I was always falling short. As I put the letter back in the box, a knot formed in my stomach. I had to face the reality that Sophie and I had been treated so differently throughout our lives. It wasn't just about the small things, those little moments when I felt overlooked, but the bigger things, the ones that shaped our futures. I remember how our parents always made sure Sophie was taken care of. They paid her tuition without hesitation, bought her a brand new car when she turned 21, and even paid for her trips and extracurricular activities. They didn't hesitate for a second. Meanwhile, I was left to struggle. I took on part-time jobs throughout my years in school just to make ends meet. I never asked for their help, not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't feel like I was entitled to it. It wasn't that I wanted a new car or lavish vacations. But what I wanted, what I really needed, was the same opportunity Sophie got. A chance to focus on my studies without having to worry about every penny I spent. I wanted the feeling that I wasn't invisible, that my achievements were just as important as hers. Instead, I spent my college years juggling jobs at the coffee shop, working late nights to cover rent, and trying to keep my grades up while being the invisible twin. The silent one. The one who had to prove myself over and over, not just to the world but to my own parents. I thought things would get better after we graduated. That somehow, with all my hard work, they'd finally see me. But nothing changed. The conversations with Mom and Dad were always the same. Every time I tried to talk to them about how I felt, about how much I had sacrificed just to be recognized, their response was predictable. Rachel, you've always been independent. You don't need us the way Sophie does. Those words stung like a slap in the face. Because, in a way, it felt like they were saying, you don't matter as much. Every single time I felt smaller. There was one conversation I'll never forget. It was the week after graduation, and we were sitting around the dinner table. Sophie and I had just finished our medical school graduation, both with honors. I felt proud, deserving even, but the words that came next shattered that feeling. Rachel, you know you've always been more resourceful than Sophie, Dad said, as he passed the mashed potatoes. You didn't need help paying for your tuition. You've always had the drive to get things done on your own. And there it was. The subtle acknowledgement that Sophie didn't have that same drive. That she needed more. That she needed them. They said it in such a casual way, as though it was just the way things were supposed to be. But I knew what they meant. They were saying it was okay to treat us differently because Sophie, in their eyes, was the one who needed help. And I was just fine on my own. I pushed the food around my plate, trying to hide the knot in my stomach. It's not about needing help, I said quietly. It's about fairness. We've both worked hard, and we should be treated the same. Mom looked up from her plate, her eyes softening. But you're fine, Rachel. You've always been fine. You've always figured it out. Her words were so matter-of-fact. It was as though my hard work, my struggles were invisible to her, because I was always able to handle it. Sophie, on the other hand, had always been the one they saw as needing attention, needing validation. I could feel the weight of everything that had been left unsaid hanging in the air. I couldn't tell if Sophie understood the difference either. I think she knew deep down, but she never questioned it. She never felt the need to. There was a part of me that resented Sophie for not speaking up more, for not seeing what was happening. But I also knew she wasn't the problem. She didn't create the imbalance. She was just the beneficiary of it. And maybe, just maybe, she was as trapped as I was. But I couldn't help feeling that somehow she had it easier. Her life had been smoother, paved with the love and support of our parents, while I had to scrape and claw for every little bit of recognition I could get. And yet, she never seemed to notice. The more I thought about it, the more I realized. The hardest part wasn't the work I had to do to get where I am today. It wasn't the long nights, the endless assignments, or the part-time jobs. The hardest part was being invisible. It was working so hard to be seen and still feeling like a shadow. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine, that the way they treated us didn't matter. Because it did matter. And I had to find a way to make it stop. But how? How could I make them see me when I had been invisible for so long? Despite everything, I kept going. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot. But in a strange way, my frustration fueled me. If I wasn't going to get the recognition I deserved from my parents, then I'd prove it to myself. I'd make my achievements count, even if no one else saw them. There were nights when I sat up late, staring at my textbooks, my mind racing with ideas I couldn't quite grasp. There were moments when I felt like giving up, when the exhaustion from working part-time jobs and studying for exams felt too heavy to bear. But I pushed through. I didn't have the luxury of relying on anyone. I was alone in this, and I had to make it count. I remember when I got the email about the research fellowship at Johns Hopkins. I had been waiting for weeks, but even when the message came, I almost couldn't believe it. The Patterson Fellowship was a prestigious opportunity for neurosurgical research, and they only selected one graduating student for it each year. It was exactly what I needed: loan forgiveness and a chance to focus on my work without the constant stress of financial pressure. I read the email over and over again, not quite able to absorb what it was telling me. I had earned it. My work on neurovascular regeneration after traumatic brain injury had stood out to the committee. Dr. Vivian Fleming had recommended me for the fellowship, and it was her faith in me that had sealed the deal. Dr. Fleming had been more than just a mentor to me. She had been the first person who truly saw me, not as the quiet twin, not as the one who had to work harder to get by, but as someone with potential, someone who could make a real difference in the field of neurosurgery. I'll never forget the first time I met Dr. Fleming in her office. Her silver hair framed her face like a halo of wisdom, and her sharp blue eyes saw straight through me. It was intimidating at first, but she didn't make me feel small. She challenged me, encouraged me, and pushed me in ways that I never thought possible. "You've got a gift, Rachel," she told me once after one of our many late-night lab sessions. "You see patterns others miss. That kind of insight can't be taught." For the first time, I felt like someone understood me. Someone believed in me. That belief turned into something more, something real. It became the driving force behind my work. My research was no longer just about grades or accolades. It was about making a difference, about pushing boundaries, and about proving to myself that I was worth something beyond the shadow of my twin sister. And then when I received the fellowship, the weight of it all hit me. This wasn't just a scholarship. It was a validation of everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. It was a chance to start over, to break free from the confines of my family's expectations and carve my own path. I had done this on my own, and that felt better than any acknowledgement I could ever get from them. But even as I stood in my new office at Johns Hopkins, feeling the excitement of this new chapter, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I still needed something. That perhaps, no matter how much I achieved, there would always be a piece of me that longed for recognition from my parents. The same parents who had given Sophie everything. The same parents who had never really seen me. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to find a way to break free from their expectations. I had to make them see me, not just as the resourceful twin, but as someone worthy of their love, respect, and support. But for now, I had to focus on what lay ahead. The fellowship was my opportunity to start fresh, to prove to the world, and to myself that I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval. I had earned my place here, and I wasn't going to let anything hold me back. And yet, deep down, I knew I would always want to hear them say it. I wanted them to look at me the way they looked at Sophie. I wanted them to be proud of me. But that was something I had to do for myself now. The rest of the world would recognize my worth, and eventually, I'd learn to accept that. For now, though, my journey was just beginning. The night of Sophie's celebration arrived, and I knew exactly what to expect. It wasn't that I wasn't happy for her. She was my sister after all. But the whole thing felt so painfully one-sided. The invitation had come with a flourish, with our parents going all out, renting an entire venue for the occasion. But not once, not a single time did they acknowledge my graduation too. It was as if, in their eyes, my accomplishments didn't deserve to be celebrated. I stood on the outskirts of the event, feeling small and out of place. Guests milled around in cocktail attire, sipping champagne and chatting merrily. Sophie was the center of attention as expected. Everyone surrounded her, congratulating her on the incredible achievement of finishing medical school debt-free. My parents beamed with pride, the spotlight solely on her. I glanced at the menu, at the decorations, at the speeches being made. Everything was designed to celebrate Sophie's success. There were no mentions of me. No speeches about my research, no recognition of my hard work, no acknowledgement that I had made it through medical school too. It stung, but I swallowed the bitterness down. It wasn't about me. It never had been. I spent the evening doing what I always seemed to do, hovering on the edges. I was the one who checked the food, made sure the drinks were topped off, and spoke politely to relatives who barely knew my name. No one seemed to notice me standing there. In the background, as usual. I had hoped things might be different this time, that maybe they'd see me for once, but as the evening wore on, I realized that no matter what I did, I was invisible. And Sophie, though she was my twin, was the one who had the world's attention. But then as I was passing by the buffet table, making sure everything was arranged properly, I froze. Standing by the corner of the room was a familiar face, one I hadn't seen in years. It was Dr. Andrew Jacobs, my former mentor. The one who had helped me during my early years in med school, but had turned a cold shoulder when I needed support the most. I hadn't expected to see him here. My heart skipped a beat as I walked toward him, unsure of how to approach. The last time I saw Dr. Jacobs was during a particularly difficult semester when I had struggled to balance work and school. He had promised to help me, but when I reached out for guidance, he backed away, citing prior commitments. I'd always wondered why. Now here he was standing in the same room as me, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and resentment bubbling up inside me. "Dr. Jacobs?" I said cautiously, approaching him. He turned at the sound of my voice, his expression softening when he recognized me. "Rachel," he said, a smile breaking across his face. "It's been a long time. How have you been?" His tone was friendly, but there was something about it that felt distant, as if there was a gap between the two of us that he wasn't willing to cross. "I've been well," I replied, my voice betraying none of the tension I felt. "Congrats on being invited. I didn't expect to see you here." He laughed lightly, adjusting his tie. "Oh well, you know how it is. Your parents thought it would be nice to have a few colleagues attend. They've always been very supportive, haven't they?" I stiffened at the mention of my parents. It wasn't the first time someone had made that comment about them, but for some reason, it stung more tonight. They were proud of Sophie, yes. But what about me? "They've been very supportive," I echoed, my voice tight. "And you? How have you been?" His eyes flickered briefly, and I noticed something in his expression, a slight hesitation before he answered. "I've been good. Busy as always." He paused. "But I've been hearing great things about your work, Rachel. Dr. Fleming told me all about the fellowship you've been awarded at Johns Hopkins. Congratulations. That's quite the achievement." I nodded, grateful for his praise, though a strange unease settled in my chest. I hadn't expected him to bring up my fellowship, especially not here, in front of Sophie's celebration. It was like a stark contrast, the recognition I had worked so hard for, in the same room where I felt like a ghost. "Thank you," I said quietly, trying to mask the bitterness that was creeping in. "I've been working hard. It means a lot to me." Dr. Jacobs shifted his weight, his eyes lingering on me a little longer than necessary. I could tell he was thinking something, but he wasn't saying it. "You know, Rachel," he began, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." I leaned in, curious despite myself. "What is it?" He looked around the room, as if making sure no one else was listening. "I was involved in some conversations about you with your parents a while back. They were concerned about your future." I narrowed my eyes, confused. "What do you mean?" "They wanted to make sure you were getting the recognition you deserved," he continued, his words slow, almost deliberate. "But, well, you know how it goes. Sometimes people don't always see things clearly when they're too close to the situation." His words made my stomach churn. It was like he was hinting at something more, something I wasn't quite ready to hear. My parents had always been blind to my struggles, to the way I'd been overlooked. And now here he was acting as though he knew everything. "What do you mean by that?" I asked again, my voice firm. He hesitated, then sighed, looking almost regretful. "It's not my place to say, Rachel. But let's just say that there are things about your family dynamics that might not be as simple as they appear." I stood there, frozen, trying to process his words. My heart raced. There were things about my family that I didn't know? Things that explained the way they had treated me? I wasn't sure what he was hinting at, but something told me that there were secrets. Secrets that had been buried for far too long. As I walked away, my mind was buzzing with questions. What was he trying to tell me? And what else didn't I know about the family I thought I understood? The evening wore on, but my sense of alienation never left. Sophie was still the star of the night, and I was stuck playing the invisible twin just as I had always been. The air felt thick with unspoken words and hidden resentments. I could see it on Sophie's face too. She was basking in the attention, but there was something in her eyes that told me she wasn't entirely comfortable with it. I watched her smile and laugh with friends and relatives, but something seemed forced about it. She was always the one who made people feel comfortable, the one who thrived in social situations. But tonight, I could tell she was struggling beneath the weight of her own role. As the night continued, the speeches began. There was applause, toasts, and compliments, all aimed at Sophie. I stood to the side, still clutching my drink, unsure of where I belonged in the midst of this celebration. It was the same routine. Sophie was praised for her beauty, her success, her charm. My achievements, my struggles, they didn't matter here. They never had. Then, unexpectedly, Sophie excused herself from the conversation she was in and walked toward the microphone set up at the front of the room. I followed her with my gaze, unsure of what she was planning. The room grew quieter, the chatter dying down as everyone turned their attention to her. I could see the hesitation in her posture, the slight tremble in her hand as she adjusted the microphone. But when she spoke, her voice was steady, clear. "I just wanted to say a few words," Sophie began, and for the first time that night the room felt still. Her usual confident demeanor was replaced with something more genuine. Something raw. "Tonight, as much as I appreciate the love and support, I know this celebration isn't just about me. It's about something much bigger. It's about family, about the sacrifices we make, and about the people who helped us get here." She paused, looking around the room, and then her eyes locked with mine. I could feel my heart tighten in my chest. This wasn't the Sophie I knew, the one who was always quick with a joke or a compliment. This was the Sophie who had something serious to say. She took a breath, her voice wavering slightly as she continued. "I wouldn't be here without my sister, Rachel. We've been through so much together, and she's the reason I'm standing here tonight. She's the one who's always had my back, always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. She deserves just as much recognition as I do, if not more. Rachel has worked harder than anyone I know. She's had to fight for everything she's gotten. She's done it all without the help of our parents. And she deserves to be celebrated, too." I stood frozen, shock rippling through me as Sophie's words sank in. This wasn't happening. Sophie, my sister, the one who had always been the golden child, was standing up for me. For the first time, she was giving me the credit I'd been denied for so long. I felt my throat tighten, my eyes beginning to sting. It was almost too much to process. The room was silent for a moment, and then murmurs of surprise and approval started circulating. I could feel the tension in the air shift, and I saw my parents exchange confused, uncomfortable glances. But I didn't care. Sophie had said it, and in that moment nothing else mattered. She had acknowledged everything I had been working for, everything I had sacrificed, and she had made it clear to everyone that I was worthy of recognition too. As Sophie stepped back from the microphone, the applause started. But it wasn't the same polite applause I had been hearing all evening. This time there was genuine warmth behind it, as if the guests were really seeing me for the first time. But as the applause died down and Sophie returned to my side, I could see the change in her. She wasn't smiling as brightly as before. She was standing a little taller, her eyes a little more distant. It was like the weight of her own words had begun to settle on her. Sophie turned to me, her voice softer now, almost like she was speaking to herself more than to me. "You don't know how hard it's been for me, Rachel," she whispered so quietly that only I could hear. "I've always felt like I was living in your shadow, like I could never measure up to you. But tonight I realized something. I don't want to be in your shadow anymore. I don't want to be the one who gets everything handed to me, who gets the attention just because I'm the one people expect to succeed. I've been so focused on trying to be perfect, trying to please mom and dad, that I've forgotten who I really am. I've spent my whole life trying to make them proud, But I don't want to do that anymore. My heart sank. Sophie, my sister, the one who had always seemed so comfortable with the life they had given her, was telling me that she had been trapped in the same way I had. She had been living under the pressure of their expectations just like I had. I don't want to be their perfect daughter anymore, Rachel. I want to live my own life. And I want to do it on my own terms. Her words hit me like a wave. I could feel the weight of everything that had been unsaid for so long crashing over me. Sophie wasn't the golden child. She wasn't the one who had it all figured out. She had been struggling too, but in her own way. I've been carrying this guilt for so long, Sophie continued. But now I'm ready to find my own way. And I don't want to be in your shadow anymore. I want us both to stand on our own equally. For the first time in my life, I saw Sophie as someone who was finally ready to break free from the same pressures that had shaped our lives. She wasn't just my sister anymore. She was my ally. And in that moment I realized that we didn't have to compete for their love or approval. We could stand together side by side. The energy in the room had shifted. There was a sense of camaraderie now, a warmth that hadn't been there before. Sophie's words had changed everything. The guests were no longer just clapping out of politeness, but genuinely acknowledging the effort and strength I had put into my journey. Still, as I stood there, I felt a knot in my stomach. For all the applause and the shift in the atmosphere, I knew that it wasn't enough. No matter how many people recognized my work, it wouldn't change the way I felt when I looked at my parents. It wouldn't change the years of being overlooked. Then, just as I was beginning to process everything, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see Dr. Vivian Fleming, my mentor, smiling at me with that quiet confidence that always made me feel like I was about to hear something important. "Rachel," she said softly, "may I have a word?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I followed her toward the front of the room, where a small podium had been set up for the speeches. My heart was still racing from the conversation with Sophie, but I was relieved to find some space where I could take a breath. Dr. Fleming had been a guiding force in my academic life, and in that moment, I could feel my anxiety begin to settle under her reassuring presence. "Thank you, Dr. Fleming, for everything," I said, trying to steady my voice. She gave me a small nod. "I've been watching you work for the past 2 years, Rachel. You've done something truly remarkable." Before I could respond, she turned toward the crowd, drawing the attention of the guests. The murmurs of conversation quieted as she adjusted the microphone. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," Dr. Fleming said, her voice steady and commanding. "I have something important to share about Rachel." I wasn't prepared for what came next. "The Patterson Fellowship," she continued, "is one of the most prestigious honors in the world of neurosurgical research. Only one student is selected each year, and it's based on their work, dedication, and ability to push the boundaries of what's possible. This year, I'm proud to announce that Rachel has been awarded the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins." There was a brief moment of stunned silence before the applause erupted. The sound of clapping filled the room, and for the first time tonight, I felt like I was truly seen. My heart swelled and I fought to hold back tears. This was the recognition I had worked so hard for, and it felt like the culmination of everything I had ever wanted, except it wasn't just about the fellowship. It was the validation, the acknowledgement that I had earned this place on my own, without the safety net of my parents' support. Dr. Fleming smiled at me, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Rachel's work in neurovascular regeneration after traumatic brain injury has the potential to change the way we treat such injuries. She has worked tirelessly, often in isolation, to bring her research to the forefront of the field. And now, with the Patterson Fellowship, she has the opportunity to continue this groundbreaking work, completely debt-free. This is her achievement, her moment. Let's give her the recognition she truly deserves." The applause was louder this time, and I felt my cheeks flush with a mix of pride and disbelief. But in that moment I realized something. This wasn't just my achievement. This was a moment of vindication for everything I had fought for. The years of silence, the years of being overlooked, this was my reward for all of it. As the applause died down, I stood there, still trying to process everything. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and when I turned, I saw my mother standing next to me. Her face was soft, not the stern expression I had come to expect, but something more vulnerable. Her eyes were red, and I could tell she was struggling to hold back tears. "Mom," I whispered, surprised by her presence. Rachel, can we talk? She asked, her voice almost trembling. I nodded, leading her away from the crowd. I had no idea what she was going to say, but part of me dreaded it. We found a quieter spot by the side of the room, away from the noise of the celebration. My mother took a deep breath before speaking, her hands clasped in front of her nervously. I don't know how to start this, she said softly. I've been thinking about everything tonight. About what Sophie said, about what Dr. Fleming said about you. I raised an eyebrow, not sure where this was going. I braced myself, expecting the usual justifications. The same old excuses. You know, I've always believed in you, Rachel, she continued, her voice trembling. But I've failed you. I failed to show you just how much you mean to me. Sophie's right. You've always done things on your own, and I've hidden behind that. I've always thought that you didn't need me, that you were fine, that you were stronger than anyone else. But I see now that was just me being afraid. I blinked, shocked. Afraid of what, Mom? She looked down, her eyes filled with regret. Afraid of admitting that I didn't know how to help you. Afraid of seeing you struggle and not knowing what to do. So I focused all my attention on Sophie. She needed me. But you were always so independent, so capable. I thought I didn't have to worry about you. But I was wrong. I felt a knot form in my chest as her words hit me like a wave. I didn't know what to say. I had always believed that my parents had never really seen me, that they had never cared enough to understand my pain. But now my mother was telling me something I never expected to hear. I love you, Rachel, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I always have. And I'm so sorry for the way I've treated you. I stood there, speechless, as the weight of her confession sank in. I hadn't expected this, not from her, not in this way. For the first time in my life, I felt like my mother truly saw me. The applause was still ringing in my ears as I walked back to my seat, my legs feeling weak and my heart racing. Felt like a dream. For the first time in my life, I was being celebrated, not as Sophie's twin, not as the quiet one, but for who I truly was. For the work I had done, for the sacrifices I had made, and for the path I had carved on my own. It was overwhelming, and yet as I sat back down I realized something was missing. The room was buzzing with excitement, but there was an underlying tension I couldn't ignore. The faculty, the friends, even the distant relatives who had been invited to the party were all coming up to congratulate me, their voices warm with genuine praise. I could hear snippets of conversation, people saying how proud they were of me, how they had always known I had it in me. And yet, amidst all of this, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. My parents weren't joining in. They were standing off to the side, their faces stiff with embarrassment. It was clear that they were uncomfortable with the spotlight being on me. My mother looked away whenever someone approached me, and my father had his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The pride I had longed for from them was absent, replaced by an awkward silence. They had never expected me to be the one to steal the show, and now they were forced to confront the fact that I had done just that. I knew I had been seeking their approval for years, but seeing their discomfort now, after everything, after my achievements, was a sharp reminder that they might never fully accept or acknowledge me in the way I wanted. I tried to shake it off, but the weight of their indifference still lingered in my chest. And then there was Sophie. She had been standing quietly near the door, chatting with some of our old professors, but when she noticed me sitting alone, she made her way over. The moment our eyes met, something shifted in her expression. She was smiling, but it wasn't the usual smile. There was something different in the way she looked at me, a sense of pride that I hadn't seen before. Rachel, Sophie said, her voice full of warmth. I just want to say, I'm so proud of you. I always knew you could do it. I could see that she meant it. This wasn't just a courtesy. This wasn't her doing what was expected of her. Sophie was finally seeing me. Not just as the person she had always looked up to, but as someone who had walked a very different path. It was the first time I truly felt like she was looking at me as an equal. For so many years, I had been jealous of the attention Sophie received from our parents, the way she seemed to glide through life with everything handed to her. I had always believed she didn't see the unfairness of it all, that she never understood how hard I had worked to stay afloat. But now, as she stood next to me, her hand on my shoulder, I saw something else in her. I saw the same struggle I had carried for years. I've been thinking a lot, Sophie continued, her eyes softening, About everything. About what I said earlier, and about how things have been between us. She paused, taking a breath as if preparing to say something difficult. I've always felt like I was supposed to be perfect for Mom and Dad. They've always expected so much from me, and I think I resented you for it. Because you never had to try. You always had everything under control. I blinked, taken aback by her words. Sophie had always seemed so self-assured, so confident in who she was. I never realized how much pressure she had been under too. But the truth is, she said quietly, I've been living in your shadow too, Rachel. I didn't know how to be my own person because I was always trying to be what they wanted me to be. And I see now that it wasn't fair to you. You've worked so hard and I never gave you the credit you deserved. I felt a lump form in my throat. The weight of her words, her honesty, hit me harder than I expected. Sophie had always been the one in the spotlight, the one everyone expected to succeed, but hearing her admit how hard it had been for her made me see things differently. We had both been carrying the weight of our parents' expectations, but we had never talked about it. We had never really understood what the other was going through. I'm sorry, Rachel, Sophie continued, her voice trembling slightly. I never understood, not fully. I just wanted to make them proud. But I see now that I need to make myself proud first. I reached up and squeezed her hand, feeling an unexpected bond between us. It's okay, Sophie. I understand. We've both been doing our best in our own ways. I'm just glad we're finally talking about it. For the first time in my life, I felt like Sophie truly understood me. And in that moment, I realized that maybe we had both been stuck in the same cycle, playing roles that weren't our own. But tonight, things were different. We weren't competing anymore. We were two sisters side by side, ready to break free from the expectations that had shaped our lives. As the evening wore on, I noticed something else. My parents were starting to relax at least a little. I saw Mom and Dad looking at Sophie and me, and for the first time in a long time, their expressions weren't filled with disappointment or confusion. They were watching us, really watching us. Maybe they didn't understand everything. Maybe they never would. But something had shifted, something I had longed for my whole life. Tonight, we weren't just the perfect daughters they had always tried to mold us into. Tonight, we were just Rachel and Sophie. Two women proud of who they had become, ready to stand together, not as rivals but as equals. The night had drawn to a close, but the conversation Sophie and I had shared earlier still lingered in the air. As the last guests filtered out and the quiet of the empty hall settled around us, I found myself standing next to Sophie, feeling both lighter and more vulnerable than I had in years. The weight of everything that had been said and unsaid between us felt like it was finally starting to dissipate. For the first time, it felt like we were truly seeing each other. Sophie had insisted we leave the party early. She was clearly exhausted, but there was something more behind her decision. I could tell she wanted to talk, really talk, and not just about the celebration or the attention we'd gotten. She wanted to address the things we had both been running from for so long. We drove to the small park by the river, a place we'd both gone to when we were younger to escape the noise of home, to find some quiet. I had expected her to be quiet, but once we settled on the old wooden bench by the water, she turned to me with an intensity one hadn't seen before. I've been thinking, Rachel, Sophie began, her voice hesitant, about everything you said earlier, about what I said, and about the way things have been for us. She paused, looking at the water, her fingers absently tugging at the sleeve of her jacket. I've always felt lucky that I was the one Mom and Dad paid attention to, that I got their love so easily. But now I realize, maybe that wasn't luck at all. Maybe it was something more complicated than that. I watched her carefully, listening to every word. Sophie had always been the one with the answers, the one who had everything figured out. But tonight she looked different. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that I had never seen before. I thought they were proud of me, but the more I think about it, I see now that they were just making sure I didn't fall. They put so much pressure on me to be perfect, to be the one they could show off to their friends, the one they could brag about. And I didn't realize how much that held me back, Rachel. I've never had to struggle the way you have. I never had to prove myself in the same way. And in some ways, I think it's kept me from growing. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Sophie had always seemed so self-assured, so confident in her place in our family. But now, I could see that the same privileges that had made her life easier had also boxed her in. They had created expectations that kept her from finding her true self, just as I had been boxed in by the lack of support that left me to constantly prove my worth. I've always been the one who could do no wrong in their eyes, Sophie continued, her voice shaky now. But I've been living a lie. I've been trying to be everything they wanted, and I didn't even realize it until tonight. I've been so wrapped up in their expectations that I've forgotten how to want things for myself. And you, Rachel, she stopped, her voice breaking. You've always been the one to fight, the one to keep going even when no one saw you. You've fought for everything you've gotten, and I see that now. I see how strong you've been, how much you've had to do on your own. Her words hung in the air between us, and I couldn't help the tears that welled up in my eyes. I had always wanted Sophie to see me, to see how hard I had worked and how much I had struggled, but I never imagined that hearing it from her would hurt so much. It was as if all the years of feeling invisible were finally coming to the surface, but in a way that was raw and unrelenting. It's okay, I whispered, squeezing her hand. We've both been living in shadows, just in different ways. Sophie nodded, her expression softening. I've been so afraid of being overshadowed by you. And now I realize that I wasn't being fair to you. I was so focused on trying to be perfect that I never let myself see you for who you really are. You've had to fight for everything, and that's what makes you who you are. I didn't know what to say to that. Sophie had always been the one who had it easy, or so I thought. But now, I understood that we had both been fighting our own battles, just in different ways. I think it's time for us both to stop living for them, I said quietly, my voice steady. It's time to stop living for anyone except ourselves. You don't need to be perfect for them, Sophie. And I don't need to prove anything to them anymore either. Sophie looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You're right. I've been carrying this weight of their expectations for so long, and it's been suffocating me. I can't keep living for them. I need to live for me, for the person I want to be. I smiled, a small bittersweet smile. And I need to do the same. I've been carrying their disappointment for too long, but I can't let it define me anymore. I've earned this, Sophie. I've earned everything I've worked for. And so have you. We sat there in silence for a moment, the sound of the river filling the space between us. I could feel the weight of the years lifting piece by piece. Sophie had always been my twin, but now for the first time we were truly standing side by side. Not as rivals but as equals. I'm going to take the fellowship at Johns Hopkins, I said, my voice firm with resolve. I'm not going to let anything or anyone hold me back. Sophie nodded. And I'm going to Detroit Medical. It's time for me to carve my own path, too. Together we stood up, our arms linked, ready to face the future as sisters, not as shadows. We had spent our lives trying to meet other people's expectations, but now it was our time. Time to write our own stories on our own terms. The morning of my departure arrived faster than I had anticipated. The apartment that had been home to me for the past few years was now eerily quiet, the emptiness of the space settling into my bones. Boxes were stacked neatly in the corner, half-packed and ready for the move. There was a finality in the air, a sense of closure, but also an overwhelming sense of peace that had been absent for so long. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the city I was leaving behind. Detroit had been a place of struggle and growth for me. It was where I had fought to prove myself, where I had learned the hardest lessons about who I was and what I wanted from life. But it was also a place where I had lived in the shadows, of my parents' expectations, of Sophie's achievements, of my own doubts. Now I was stepping into a new life, one where I would no longer let the weight of their expectations define me. The fellowship at Johns Hopkins was more than just a career opportunity. It was my chance to build a life where I didn't have to prove myself to anyone. I didn't have to keep fighting for recognition from people who had never truly seen me. For the first time in my life, I was doing something entirely for myself. And that felt like freedom. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the room settle around me. The noise of the past, the doubts, the fears, they felt like they were slipping away. I had made my decision. I was no longer the invisible twin. I was Rachel, and I had earned every step I had taken to get here. As I sat there lost in my thoughts, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, glancing at the screen. It was a message from Sophie. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," it read. I know you've been waiting for this moment for a long time, but you've earned it. I'm going to miss you, but I know you're going to do amazing things. A lump formed in my throat as I read her words. Sophie had always been the one who seemed to have everything handed to her. But now she was the one who was truly supporting me. Her message wasn't just about pride, it was about understanding. Sophie, my twin sister, had finally seen me for who I was, not for who she thought I should be. And for that, I would always be grateful. As I texted her back, I felt the weight of years of tension and unspoken words lifting. We weren't perfect, and our family dynamic would never be simple. But for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. We were moving forward together in our own ways. The sound of my phone buzzing again pulled me out of my thoughts. It was a call from Mom. I hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. Our conversation had been strained for so long, and even though she had apologized, there was still so much left unsaid between us. Rachel, her voice came through softer than usual. I just wanted to say before you leave that I'm proud of you. I know I've said it before, but I want you to hear it. I've always loved you. I've always been proud of you, even if I didn't show it the right way. I closed my eyes, taking in her words. I could feel the sincerity behind them, the vulnerability in her voice. For years I had felt like I was nothing more than a shadow in her eyes, but now it felt like we were finally connecting. I know, Mom, I replied, my voice steady. I understand now, and I'm glad we can finally talk about it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I want you to be happy, Rachel. I want you to live your life the way you want, not the way we've always expected. Go to Johns Hopkins. Make your own path. And know that we'll always love you. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. It was a shift in the way I had always seen our relationship. Maybe we would never be the family I had imagined, but for the first time, it felt like we were finally moving toward understanding. I will, Mom. I promise, I said softly. And I love you too. The call ended, and I sat in the silence of the room, letting her words settle in my chest. It wasn't the closure I had once thought I needed, but it was enough. I had found peace, not in the approval of others, but in the acceptance of myself. I was no longer trapped by the expectations of my family. I was free to live my life on my own terms. As I finished packing the last of my things, I couldn't help but think about Sophie. She had made her own decision too. While I was heading to Baltimore to pursue my career, she was choosing to stay in Detroit, carving out her own path at Detroit Medical. I knew she had found the courage to step away from the weight of our parents' expectations, just as I had. And that made me proud of her too. I grabbed my suitcase and walked toward the door, taking one last look at the apartment. It wasn't just a goodbye to the city or the place I had lived. It was a goodbye to the person I had been, someone shaped by the limitations of my family's expectations. As I stepped into the unknown, I knew I was walking into a future where I would finally write my own story. And Sophie, in her own way, was doing the same. We were no longer bound by the past. We were free of a new chapter for both sisters.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.